Gentlemen, stop what you're doing right now, because what I'm about to tell you in the next few minutes has completely transformed the relationships of thousands of men who thought they already knew everything. Here's the hard truth. You don't, and neither did I. Until 20 years of sitting across from real couples in real pain taught me something that no one ever bothered to explain. There are specific places on a woman's body that don't just feel good, they unlock her emotionally. They signal to her nervous system that she is safe, seen, and deeply wanted. And most men are completely missing them. Not because they don't care, but because nobody ever showed them the map. My name is Mary Smith, and I'm the host of the Mindful Senior Living YouTube channel. For years, I've sat in quiet therapy rooms listening to stories that rarely get told out loud. Stories of couples who still loved each other deeply, yet somehow felt miles apart. Stories of men who couldn't understand why the woman beside them felt emotionally distant. And stories of women who didn't feel unloved. They felt unseen, invisible. And those two feelings are not the same. If you're watching this right now, I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself something honestly. When was the last time your partner felt truly noticed by you? Not just appreciated for what she does, not thanked for the responsibilities she carries, but truly noticed. As a woman, as a human being with emotions, tension, vulnerability, and quiet needs that often go unspoken. Because here's something many men are never taught. Connection for a woman often begins in the smallest moments, in gestures so subtle they almost seem insignificant. And yet, those moments are the ones that shape how safe, loved, and emotionally close she feels with you. Over the last 2 decades, I've worked with couples in their 30s, their 50s, even their 70s. I've seen marriages on the edge of collapse slowly come back to life. I've watched couples who barely spoke to each other rediscover warmth they thought had disappeared forever. And do you know what the turning point often was? It wasn't a grand romantic gesture. It was awareness, a shift in how a man showed up emotionally and physically in the smallest interactions. Because the truth is this, women experience touch very differently than men do. The female nervous system processes touch through emotional context. That means the intention behind a touch, the timing of it, the gentleness of it, the awareness within it. All of that matters more than most men realize. And science backs this up. Neuroscience research shows that certain areas of the female body contain higher concentrations of nerve endings linked directly to emotional bonding centers in the brain. So today, I'm going to walk you through 7 specific zones on a woman's body. Not in a crude way, not in a manipulative way, and certainly not as some kind of shortcut to intimacy. These are emotional gateways, places where your touch can communicate something deeper than words often can. When approached with presence, patience, and genuine care, these zones activate feelings of safety, warmth, and emotional closeness that many relationships slowly lose over time. Now, before we go further, if you're someone who genuinely wants to become a better partner, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Every week, I share insights that come directly from real clinical experience and real relationship psychology. Not surface-level advice, but the kind of understanding that can truly change the dynamic between two people. Now, let's begin with the first zone. And I promise you, this one surprises almost every man who hears it. The hands. Not her waist, not her lips, her hands. Most men treat holding hands like a social gesture, something polite. But psychologically speaking, the hands are one of the most powerful bonding points in the human body. When you hold a woman's hand slowly, gently, and with real intention, something remarkable happens in her nervous system. Research on oxytocin, the hormone responsible for bonding, trust, and emotional closeness, shows that intentional physical contact through the hands can trigger measurable increases in this hormone. In simple terms, the right kind of hand contact tells her brain, I am safe here. But there is an important difference between holding a hand and connecting through it. Let me tell you about a couple I worked with several years ago. The husband was a quiet man in his early 60s. He loved his wife deeply, but he struggled to express affection. During one of our sessions, his wife said something that stopped the room cold. She looked at him and said, I can't remember the last time you held my hand like you meant it. That moment hit him, harder than any argument they had ever had. The following week, he came back and told me something simple had happened. They were sitting together on the couch. He reached over, took her hand gently, and just held it. Within a few minutes, she leaned her head on his shoulder. That hadn't happened in years. You see, when a woman feels your attention through touch, her mind begins to relax, her body softens, her guard lowers. It's not about technique, it's about presence. Now, here's something most men overlook completely. Your hands themselves matter. Rough, cold, inattentive hands can break the emotional effect instantly. I'm not talking about perfection. I'm talking about awareness. Taking care of your hands, warming them slightly before touching her, slowing down your movements. These small details communicate attentiveness, and attentiveness is one of the most attractive qualities a man can possess. Now, let's move to the second zone. And this one carries an extraordinary amount of emotional weight for many women. The nape of the neck, right where the hairline begins. This is one of the most tension-filled areas of the female body. Think about the average day. Many women carry responsibilities, work stress. By the time evening arrives, her nervous system is often still in a state of quiet stress. When you place your hand gently at the back of her neck, it signals safety to the nervous system. I once worked with a man who felt like he had completely lost emotional access to his wife. One evening, he walked up behind her quietly and placed his hand softly at the back of her neck, just resting it there. She froze for a moment. Then she exhaled deeply. And when she turned around, her eyes were filled with tears. Relief. Later, she told him it was the first time in years she felt like he truly saw her stress without her having to explain it. Now, if you're finding this perspective helpful so far, take a second and tap the like button. It helps the video reach more people who might genuinely benefit from understanding these dynamics. And if you've ever experienced a moment like the ones I'm describing, I'd love to hear about it in the comments as well, because these small shifts are often the beginning of something much bigger. Now, let's talk about the third zone, the lower back. That quiet space between the waist and the hips carries a message that words rarely communicate clearly. When a man places his hand there gently while walking beside a woman, it says, I'm here with you. Not controlling you, not claiming ownership, simply present. And presence is one of the most undervalued forms of affection in modern relationships. Many couples today spend time together physically, yet emotionally, they remain miles apart. But when a man places his hand gently on a woman's lower back while guiding her through a doorway, sends a quiet signal of connection. Her nervous system recognizes it as partnership, as unity. It's a gesture that says, you're moving through the world together. And interestingly, women often notice when this gesture disappears long before men realize it's gone. One woman once told me something that stayed with me for years. She said, I knew we were drifting apart when he stopped touching my back when we walked together. Think about that for a moment. Not when they stopped going on dates, when the small gestures disappeared. Because small gestures are the daily language of emotional intimacy. And if what we've discussed so far is already shifting the way you see connection, I want you to stay with me. The next zones become even more psychologically significant. Some of them require trust that already exists. Some of them build trust that may have been missing for years. And when approached with patience and sincerity, they can reopen emotional closeness that many couples assume is gone forever. In the next part, we're going to talk about the fourth zone, one that women often describe not as feeling desired, but as feeling treasured. And that difference changes everything. The fourth zone is one that many men overlook completely. Yet, when it is approached with the right awareness, it can awaken a kind of emotional warmth that goes far beyond simple attraction. This zone sits just behind the ear, right beneath the jawline. Now, at first glance, that may seem like a small, almost insignificant place. But psychologically and neurologically, this area is extremely sensitive. The skin here is thin, filled with nerve endings, and closely connected to emotional and sensory pathways in the brain. Which means a gentle, thoughtful touch here doesn't just register physically, it registers emotionally. But this is important. This zone is not about rushing. In fact, there is one mistake many men make. It is approaching sensitive areas too quickly before the emotional atmosphere is ready. When that happens, the body tightens instead of relaxing. Instead of feeling cherished, a woman may feel pressured or startled. Touch behind the ear requires something deeper first: trust. Think about it this way. This area is close to the face, close to the senses, close to her personal space. When you touch there, gently, slowly, almost as if you're brushing away a loose strand of hair, the message being communicated is not just desire, it's care. Many women have described this kind of touch not as exciting in a loud way, but as deeply comforting in a quiet way. It makes them feel treasured rather than pursued. And for many mature women, especially women who have lived through disappointments or emotional wounds in past relationships, feeling treasured matters far more than feeling chased. Let me tell you about a conversation I once had with a woman in her late 50s. She had been married for nearly 30 years, and yet she told me something very simple that broke my heart a little. She said, "Do you know the last time my husband touched my face or tucked my hair behind my ear? I honestly cannot remember." That wasn't a complaint about physical intimacy. It was a longing for gentleness. Because the truth is, over time, many couples become efficient partners. They manage the household, they solve problems, they handle responsibilities. But somewhere along the way, the tenderness that once existed quietly disappears. And often, neither partner even notices when it happens. A simple gesture, like brushing a strand of hair away from her ear, or resting your fingers lightly beneath the jawline, can bring that tenderness back into the relationship. But the key is intention. Slow, relaxed, present. Not rushed, not distracted, present. Now, let's move to the fifth zone. And this one carries a surprisingly deep psychological meaning. The space between her shoulder blades. If you pause for a moment and think about the human body, this area has something unique about it. It is one of the few places on our bodies that we cannot easily see ourselves. It sits behind us, out of our direct awareness, and because of that, it holds a subtle, symbolic meaning in human psychology. When someone places their hand gently between a woman's shoulder blades, especially in a moment of quiet closeness, the message communicated is protection. Not in a controlling or possessive sense, but in a deeply reassuring one. It says, "I've got you." This kind of touch often happens naturally when couples hug or stand close together, but when it's done slowly and intentionally, it can have a calming effect on the nervous system. I remember working with a couple who had been together for more than 40 years. They had raised children together, built a life together, and yet they had fallen into a pattern of emotional distance. Nothing dramatic had happened, no betrayal, no major conflict, just distance. One day during a session, the husband described something that surprised even him. He said that one evening, he walked up behind his wife while she was washing dishes. Without thinking about it too much, he placed his hand gently between her shoulder blades and simply stood there beside her. She leaned back into him. They stayed like that for nearly a minute. Later, she told him something that stayed with him deeply. She said, "For a moment, I felt like I could finally relax." That small moment carried more emotional healing than dozens of long conversations they had attempted before. Because touch can bypass the defensive walls that words sometimes trigger. Now, before we move to the sixth zone, let me pause here for a moment and ask you something. How many of these gestures have quietly disappeared from your relationship over time? Not because you stopped caring, but because life became busy, routines formed, and attention slowly shifted elsewhere. If you're realizing that some of these small connections have faded, don't see that as a failure. See it as an opportunity. Relationships rarely collapse overnight. They drift. And the beautiful thing about drifting is that it can be corrected with small, mindful changes. If you're finding value in this conversation, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. On Mindful Senior Living, we talk about the deeper psychology of relationships, connection, and emotional intimacy in ways that many people wish they had learned decades earlier. Now, let's talk about the sixth zone, the inner thigh near the knee. Now, I want to approach this carefully because this area is often misunderstood. This is not about rushing toward intimacy. It's about pacing. Psychologically speaking, this zone sits in what we call a transitional space. It is close enough to intimacy to signal closeness, but far enough away that it doesn't automatically trigger pressure. When a man places his hand gently near this area while sitting close together, especially in a relaxed environment, like watching a movie or sitting on the couch, the body interprets it as a quiet signal of closeness. But again, patience is everything here. Rushing past this zone or treating it like a shortcut to something else often creates the opposite effect. Instead of building comfort, it creates tension. Men who understand this area recognize that intimacy grows through gradual trust. They linger in the spaces that build emotional safety rather than rushing toward the end result. And women notice this. They notice when a man is patient. They notice when his attention feels calm rather than urgent. That patience communicates respect, and respect is one of the most powerful aphrodisiacs in long-term relationships. Now, we're about to arrive at the seventh and final zone, and this one carries perhaps the deepest emotional meaning of all. But before we get there, I want you to stay with me for just a moment longer, because this final zone only works when everything we've discussed so far is already present. Trust, gentleness, patience, awareness. Without those ingredients, this zone feels intrusive. But with them, it can become one of the most intimate emotional connections two people can share. And in the next part, I'm going to explain why. Now, let's talk about the seventh and final zone. And in many ways, this one represents the deepest level of trust a woman can offer through physical closeness. This zone is the lower abdomen, just below the navel. Now, before we go any further, it's important to understand something clearly. This is not a place you approach casually, and it is certainly not a place you rush toward. This zone represents emotional vulnerability more than physical stimulation. In many ways, it sits at the center of a woman's instinctive emotional world. From a biological perspective, the lower abdomen is close to the body's core. It's an area associated with protection, instinct, and safety. When someone allows another person to place their hand there gently, it communicates an enormous level of trust. Think about it. Most of us instinctively guard the center of our bodies. When that guard drops, it means the nervous system feels safe enough to relax. And that feeling of safety is the foundation of all meaningful intimacy. I once worked with a couple who had been together for nearly 25 years. They came to see me because they felt like something had disappeared between them. They were still friends, they still respected each other, but the emotional warmth that once defined their relationship had faded. During one of our sessions, the wife described a memory from early in their marriage. She said that sometimes when they would lie down together after a long day, her husband would rest his hand gently on her stomach while they talked. Nothing sexual, just quiet closeness. She said something about that gesture made her feel grounded, calm, and deeply connected to him. Over time, that gesture disappeared. Not intentionally, just slowly, gradually, as life became busier and routines replaced those quiet moments. So I asked the husband something simple. I asked him if he would be willing to bring that gesture back. A few weeks later, they returned for another session, and something about their energy had changed. They were sitting closer together. Their voices sounded softer with each other. He told me that one evening they were lying in bed talking just like they used to years ago. He remembered our conversation and slowly placed his hand on her lower abdomen exactly the way he used to when they were younger. She didn't say anything for a moment, but she moved closer, and he realized something in that moment that many men eventually discover when they begin paying attention to these small details. The body remembers emotional safety, even after years of distance. Those memories can return when the right signals are present again. Now, at this point, you might be wondering why these specific zones carry so much emotional power when many other types of touch feel neutral or routine. The answer lies in how the female nervous system processes sensation and emotion together. Research in affective neuroscience shows that women's skin receptors in certain areas are highly responsive to gentle, slow touch. These receptors connect directly to parts of the brain responsible for emotional bonding, trust, and comfort. But the science only explains part of the story. Because after 20 years of working with couples, I've learned something that research papers rarely capture completely. Women don't respond to touch alone. They respond to intention. The emotional meaning behind. A gesture changes everything. A rush touch feels different than a mindful one. A distracted touch feels different than a present one. A touch that expects something in return feels very different from a touch that simply offers warmth. And women can sense that difference almost instantly. One of my patients once said something that perfectly captured this idea. He told me, "I didn't learn a new trick. I just started paying attention differently." And when he did, his partner responded in ways he hadn't seen in years. She laughed more. She leaned into him more. She touched him more. Not because he was trying harder, but because she felt emotionally safe enough to open again. You see, the 7 zones we've discussed today are not magic buttons. They are invitations. Each one is a small doorway that says, "I am here with you." When you touch these areas slowly, warmly, and with genuine presence, you are communicating something that words often fail to express clearly enough. You are saying, "I see you. I care about how you feel. You matter to me. And gentlemen, those three messages form the emotional foundation of every lasting relationship. Now, here's something else that might surprise you. Many men believe intimacy fades in long relationships because attraction disappears. But in my experience, that's rarely the real reason. More often, intimacy fades because emotional safety slowly erodes. Small gestures disappear, attention drifts elsewhere, and the connection that once felt natural begins to feel distant. But the beautiful thing about emotional safety is that it can be rebuilt. Not through dramatic changes, through small, consistent moments of awareness. Holding her hand when you walk together. Resting your hand gently on the back of her neck after a long day. Placing your hand on her lower back when you stand beside her. Brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Standing quietly with your hand between her shoulder blades. Lingering patiently in moments of closeness rather than rushing through them. And when the relationship already holds deep trust, resting your hand gently on the center of her body in a moment of quiet connection. These are the gestures that tell a woman her heart is safe with you. And when a woman feels safe emotionally, something remarkable happens. Her warmth returns naturally. Her affection grows naturally. Her desire grows naturally. Not because she feels pressured, but because she feels connected. Before we close today, I want to leave you with one final thought that I share with many of the couples who come through my office. Relationships rarely need grand transformations. They need consistent attention. One small gesture repeated regularly can change the entire emotional climate between two people. So, tonight or tomorrow morning or the next quiet moment you share together, try one of these gestures slowly and intentionally, not as a strategy, not as a test, but as a genuine expression of presence. You might be surprised how powerful that moment becomes. And if something in this conversation resonated with you today, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Which of these zones surprised you the most? Which one made you reflect on your own relationship? Your experiences help other viewers learn and grow as well. If you found value in this discussion, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. On Mindful Senior Living, we explore the deeper psychology of relationships, emotional connection, and the subtle dynamics that keep love alive, even after decades together. And if you know a man who could benefit from hearing this message, share this video with him. Sometimes a single insight at the right moment can completely change how someone shows up in their relationship. Until next time, remember this. Connection doesn't disappear because love fades. Connection disappears when attention fades. Bring your attention back, and love often finds its way home.